5 animals lie in a field outside Canaan. They have been split in half. A heifer, a goat, a ram, each one cut straight down the middle, each half placed across from the other. A corridor of bone and blood running through the dirt. Smaller birds, a dove and a young pigeon, have been laid at either end, whole. The man who cut them is still here. He has been here for hours. He's old and tired, and he has spent the entire afternoon doing something you might find strange, driving away vultures. Every time a bird came down to feed on the carcasses, he stood up and chased it off. He does not fully understand why. Only that God told him to prepare this, and so he prepared it, and now he waits. The sun is going down. You should know something about this man before anything else happens. He's not a priest. He's not a prophet. Not yet. He is a man from a city called a sophisticated, crowded, thoroughly pagan city at the mouth of the Euphrates River. And until not very long ago, his family worshipped idols. The God who has been speaking to him is a God he did not grow up with. He came to this faith late, at great cost, and with a great deal of confusion along the way. His name is Abram, and tonight he is sitting in the dark next to the bodies of 5 dead animals, waiting for something he cannot name. Here is what you need to know before this night is over. Fire is coming. A fire that will move through that corridor of split carcasses in the dark. And I want you to watch what that fire does, because the most important thing about it is not what it does. It is what it does not do. That single detail is the hinge on which this entire story turns. We will get to that fire. But not yet. This is not a story about a ritual. This is not a story about an old man's faith being tested. This is not a story about a promise that simply took too long to arrive. This is a story about the only moment in recorded history when the God of the universe swore a death oath, and what it cost him, centuries later, to keep it. Over the next 25 minutes, you and I are going to walk through one of the oldest and most overlooked passages in the entire Bible. Genesis chapter 15. By the time we reach the end, you will see something running like a wire from this dark field all the way to a hill outside Jerusalem. And once you see it, you will not unsee it. Stay with me. To understand what is about to happen in that field, you need to understand where Abram came from. And most people get this wrong. We tend to picture Abraham as a noble desert patriarch, a figure of great dignity, sitting in a tent somewhere, already holy, already chosen, already the kind of man God would obviously want to work with. That is not who Abram was. Not at the beginning. Abram grew up in a city called and was not a backwater. Was one of the great cities of the ancient world, a trading hub on the Euphrates River in what is now southern Iraq, home to towering ziggurats, elaborate temples, and a pantheon of gods that the local people prayed to, sacrificed to, and built their entire civic lives around. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, described Abram as a man of remarkable intelligence, an astronomer, a philosopher, a man who questioned the received wisdom of his culture from an early age. Josephus writes that Abraham began to have higher notions of virtue than others had, and he determined to reform and change the opinion all men happened then to have concerning God. But here is what the text of Scripture itself tells you, in a passage most people skip right past. In the book of Joshua, chapter 24, God speaks to the people of Israel and says this: "Long ago your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham, lived beyond the Euphrates River and worshipped other gods." Terah, Abraham's father, an idol worshiper. Here's what most people miss. God did not call a righteous man out of a righteous family. He called an ordinary man out of an ordinary pagan household, in an ordinary city full of ordinary gods. Abraham did not earn the call. He did not qualify for it. God chose him the way God has always chosen people, not because of what they were, but because of what God intended to do through them. That matters enormously for what comes next. The call itself arrives in Genesis chapter 12. Abram is 75 years old. His wife Sarai is 65, and she has never been able to have children, not once, in 4 decades of marriage. The text states it plainly and without apology. She was barren. Into this situation, God says 4 things. Leave your country, leave your people, leave your father's household. Go to a land I will show you. No map, no timeline, no contract. Just go. And then God makes 3 promises so large, they almost seem cruel given the circumstances. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless those who bless you. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. A great nation. Through a 75-year-old man and his 65-year-old barren wife. You can read that 2 ways. Either it is the cruelest joke in the history of religion, or it is the most audacious promise ever made. Abram chose to believe it was the second. He packed everything he owned and left. The years that followed were not easy. Abram and Sarai arrived in Canaan. Famine came. They went down to Egypt. Abram made a decision he was not proud of. He told Pharaoh that Sarai was his sister, not his wife, to protect himself. It was half true and entirely cowardly, and it almost cost him everything. They came back to Canaan. His nephew Lot chose the better land. Abram got the hills. 5 years passed, then 8, then 10. No son. His household grew. Livestock, servants, wealth accumulated in the way wealth accumulates when you follow a God who keeps blessing you materially, even while the one thing you need most refuses to come. But there was no child, and without a child, there was no nation, and without a nation, the promise was nothing. Abram had a servant, a faithful, capable man from Damascus named Eliezer, who had been with him long enough to know the whole story. And in Genesis chapter 15, quietly, without fanfare, Abram says something that tells you exactly how close he is to giving up. He says to God, "What can you give me, since I remain childless? The one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. He is already making alternative arrangements. You have felt that, haven't you? The moment when the hope you have been holding starts to look like foolishness. When the practical question replaces the faithful one. Eliezer was a good man. Naming him heir was not sin. It was just despair, dressed up in reasonableness. And then, God does something unexpected. He doesn't rebuke Abram. He doesn't remind him to have more faith. He takes him outside. Look up at the sky, God says. Count the stars, if indeed you can count them. And then, so shall your offspring be. Against all logic, against all evidence, against everything his body and his wife's body were telling him, Abram believed. The book of Genesis records this in one of the shortest, most loaded sentences in the entire Bible. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. The word that runs beneath this moment, the word the Psalms will use over and over to describe what God does with a covenant, is Hesed. It does not mean warm feelings. It means love that is bound by oath. Love that holds, even when the other party fails. Remember that word. You will need it before this video is over. But it gets stranger, because Abram, still standing under the stars, asks God a question that only someone still wrestling with doubt would ask. He says, "Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it?" Not a statement of faith, a question, a demand almost. Prove it. And God, Instead of turning away, instead of withdrawing, instead of saying, "Your doubt disqualifies you," God answers. He tells Abram to go and get animals, specific animals, a heifer, a goat, a ram, a dove, a young pigeon. He tells him to cut them in half and lay the pieces opposite each other. In the Hebrew, the phrase God uses is Karat, berith, to cut a covenant, literally, to cut. You are about to find out why, so let's take stock of where we are. God called a man out of a pagan family, made him a promise too large for any human to keep track of, watched him wait more than a decade with nothing to show for it, and then, instead of rebuking his doubt, invited him into a ceremony involving 5 dead animals and a corridor of blood laid out in the dirt. If you are watching this channel for the first time, this is what we do here. We go slowly, we go deep, and we do not leave until we have seen the thing most people walk right past. Hit subscribe if that sounds like your kind of study, and stay close, because what happens next in this field will change how you read your Bible. To understand what God is about to ask Abram to do, you have to leave the modern world behind entirely. You need to go back 4,000 years to a time when nations did not sign treaties. They cut them. The ancient Near East had a specific, well-documented ceremony for sealing a binding agreement between 2 parties, what scholars call a suzerain-vassal covenant, a formal pact between a great king and a lesser one. Archaeologists excavating the ruins of the ancient Hittite capital in modern-day Turkey found hundreds of these treaty documents, pressed into clay tablets, dating back to the 14th century before Christ, and every one of them follows the same pattern. The 2 parties would bring animals, large ones. They would slaughter them. They would split each carcass straight down the middle and lay the 2 halves opposite each other in the dirt, creating a corridor between them, a walkway of blood. And then both parties, the great king and the lesser king, would walk through together. Pay attention to this, because the walk was not ceremonial. It was not symbolic in a soft, polite way. It was a death oath. As each party stepped between the pieces, they were saying, without words, but with their bodies, in a language every person present understood, "If I break this covenant, let what happened to these animals happen to me. Let me be split in 2. Let my body lie open in a field." The ceremony was designed to be unforgettable, because the consequence was meant to be unthinkable. Centuries after Abram, the prophet Jeremiah would reference this exact ceremony when God confronted Israel for breaking their covenant commitments. In Jeremiah chapter 34, God says this, "The men who have violated my covenant, I will treat like the calf they cut in 2 and then walked between its pieces." God does not have to explain the reference. Every person hearing those words knew exactly what walking between the pieces meant. It meant death. It meant the full weight of the broken oath falling on the one who broke it. That is the world Abram lived in. That is the ceremony God is now asking him to prepare. So Abram goes. He brings a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. He cuts the larger animals in half, just as God instructed. He lays each piece across from its other half, left side here, right side there, until the corridor is formed. The dove and the pigeon he places whole at either end, and then he waits. Here is the detail almost nobody preaches. As Abram sits there in the heat of the day, birds of prey begin to descend on the carcasses. Vultures, coming down out of the sky, drawn by the smell of blood, landing on the split carcasses to feed. And Abram drives them away. Every time one comes down, he stands up and chases it off. He does this all afternoon. You might read that and think it is a minor logistical note, the kind of practical detail ancient narratives sometimes included just to be accurate. But think about what this scene actually looks like. An old man standing guard over a corridor of dead animals, alone in a field, waving off scavengers for hours. He does not know when God will come. He does not know if God will come. He only knows that God told him to prepare this, and so he is protecting it. He is not going anywhere. He is holding the space open for something holy that has not arrived yet. That image alone could carry a sermon. The sun begins to set, and this is where it gets remarkable. Genesis chapter 15, verse 12. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. The word the Hebrew text uses for deep sleep is Tardemah. It is not the word for ordinary sleep. It is not the word for rest. Tardemah is a divinely induced unconsciousness, the kind of sleep that falls on a man when God is about to do something the man cannot do for himself. You have seen this word once before in Scripture. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 21, when God wanted to form the woman from Adam's rib, he put Adam into a Tardemah first. The grammar is the same. The implication is the same. God is about to do something that requires the human being to be entirely out of the way. Abram cannot walk between the pieces now. He is asleep. He cannot swear the oath. He cannot lift his feet, cannot speak the words, cannot step between the halves of those animals and pledge his life against the covenant's terms. God did not ask him to walk. God did not require anything from him. God did not wait for Abram to prove himself worthy of the ceremony. God did not even wait for Abram to wake up. Before we get to what happens next, and I need you to stay with me for this, because this is the moment the entire video has been building toward. If you are finding this valuable, subscribe now. Tell one person about it. Because what moves through that field in the next few minutes is the reason I made this video. And it will change the way you read every promise God has ever made to you. Genesis chapter 15, verse 17. The sun is gone. The field is dark. Abram is unconscious, not sleeping the way you sleep at the end of a long day, but held under, pinned down by a thick and dreadful darkness that the text describes as something close to terror. He cannot move. He cannot speak. He does not know what is happening above him. And then, fire. A smoking firepot and a blazing torch appear. The Hebrew words are tanur ashan, a smoking furnace. Not a candle, not a warm glow. A furnace. The same kind of fire that will appear on the summit of Mount Sinai when Moses stands before God centuries later. The same fire that will lead Israel through the desert as a pillar of cloud by day and a column of flame by night. The same fire that will fill the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple until the priests cannot stand. When God shows up in the Old Testament, he shows up as fire. Always. And he has shown up now. The smoking firepot and the blazing torch move forward. They enter the corridor, that narrow aisle between the split carcasses of the heifer, the goat, the ram, with the dove and pigeon at either end. And the fire walks through, alone. Here's the part nobody tells you. In every other covenant ceremony in the ancient Near East, every Hittite treaty, every suzerain pact, every agreement between kings that archaeologists have ever recovered, both parties walk. The great king walks. The lesser king walks. Both of them step between the pieces. Both of them take the oath. Both of them say with their bodies, "If I break this, let me be torn apart like these animals." But in this field, on this night, only one party moves. Abram is asleep on the ground. He does not walk. He does not swear. He does not even witness it. The fire passes through the pieces without him. God makes the oath for both sides. God takes the curse for both parties. God says, not with words, but with the most ancient and binding language the human race has ever known. If this covenant is broken by either side, let the penalty fall on me. Do you understand what just happened? God did not make a deal with Abraham. He made a death oath, and he made it alone. He swore on his own life because, as the book of Hebrews says, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, he swore by himself. There was nothing higher to invoke, no greater authority to call as witness. God put his own existence on the line, walked through the blood, and signed the covenant on both sides. Now hold that thought, because I need to tell you something about what this looks like in ordinary life before we follow this fire any further. You know what a cosigner is. A parent walks into a bank. Their adult child is sitting next to them, young, unproven, no credit history, no track record, no ability to guarantee anything. The child needs a loan they cannot qualify for on their own. And the parent picks up the pen and signs. Not because they believe the child will never miss a payment. Not because the child has earned it. The parent signs because they have decided, with full knowledge of the risk, that they will absorb whatever comes. If the child defaults, the parent pays. Not naivety. Something far more costly than that. This is the most expensive kind of love a human being can offer. Love that pre-absorbs the cost of someone else's failure before the failure even arrives. That is what God did in that field. He co-signed for Abraham. He co-signed for Abraham's children. He co-signed for Isaac, for Jacob, for the 12 tribes, for a nation that would break this covenant so thoroughly and so repeatedly that the prophets would run out of metaphors for the damage. He signed knowing they would fail. He signed anyway. And the bill came due. The Apostle Paul writes it in a single sentence in Galatians chapter 3. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. The fire that walked between those pieces in Genesis 15, that same fire, that same God, walked to a hill outside Jerusalem called Golgotha. And there, on a Roman cross, the death oath was called in. The covenant had been broken, not by God, but by every generation that came after Abraham. And God, who had sworn on his own life, paid it. Not because he broke the covenant, because he had sworn to bear the penalty even if the other side did. The smoking firepot became a crown of thorns. The blazing torch became nails driven through flesh. The corridor of split animals became the torn curtain of the temple. And the God who walked alone through a dark field 4,000 years ago walked alone again, up a hill, carrying wood on his back, just as Isaac once carried wood up Mount Moriah. He did not break the covenant. He bore it. That is, he said, the love that holds when everything else has fallen apart. Every broken promise, every act of faithlessness, every idol his people ever bowed to, the same kind of idols Abraham's father Terah once kept in his house. God absorbed them all. That is what the cross is. It is not a religious symbol. It is not an ornament. It is Genesis 15, paid in full. So what do you take from this? 3 things. First, the Abrahamic Covenant was unconditional. That word matters. God did not say, I will bless you if you behave. He did not say, I will make you a great nation as long as your descendants keep the rules. He put Abraham to sleep and walked through alone. The covenant's survival does not depend on human faithfulness. It depends on God's. And God has never once broken his word. Not once. Not in 4,000 years. Not theology. A track record. Second, and this one is for you specifically, wherever you are right now. The promises God makes are not on probation. They do not expire when you fail. They do not shrink when your faith shrinks. God did not make them because you qualified. He made them the same way He made them with Abraham, while you were asleep, while you were unaware, while you had nothing to offer and no way to hold up your end. He signed for you anyway. Not a metaphor. The structure of grace itself, and it was established in a field, in the dark, over the bodies of 5 animals, before the law, before the temple, before any of it. Grace came first. Third, and this is the one I want you to carry with you after you close this video. The fire that walked alone in Genesis 15 never stopped walking. It walked through the Red Sea. It walked ahead of Israel in the wilderness. It walked into the Holy of Holies. And it walked up a hill outside Jerusalem and let itself be nailed to a cross. Because that is who this God is. He does not ask you to earn what He has already sworn to give. He does not wait for you to be ready. He moves first. He always moves first. When you picture that scene, God passing through the dark while Abraham slept, swearing an oath he knew would cost him everything, what does that image do to you? I want to know. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video changed something in you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the right word at the right time is the difference between giving up and holding on. One more thing before you go. Do not forget this image. An old man asleep in the dirt, a field full of death, and a fire, moving through the dark alone, making a promise it intended to keep no matter what it cost. God walked alone through that field so that one day you would never have to walk alone through yours.